Hey, welcome back to The Socialist Shelf. It's the podcast where we care about good fiction and changing the world. I'm Jacob, and like I said last week, unfortunately, Joss is out. You'll have to listen to the episode for explanation why. Something to do with woolly mammoth related surgery. It's not a big deal. But we have a guest on this week. It's a fellow by the name of D. Mason. He can introduce himself, but just to speak on it a little bit. I believe D. Mason is a forest mage. He's sort of a master of the arts of the woodlands. Sort of a from if you follow him on Twitter, you'll know what I'm talking about. But go ahead and introduce yourself, Mason.
Yeah, most folks know me on Twitter as D. Mason, and I engage in and practice dirt magic whenever I'm not working my ass off. Try to show folks how to find food and medicine in the woods. And I do a little bit of writing and a whole lot of reading on the subject and that sort of thing. But I'm excited to step out of that and talk about something else, reading along another very important subject, which is I don't even know where to start with this book.
Yeah. Hell yeah. And I mean, both of us are kind of like, both of us, I think, come kind of from like the fantasy junkie kind of side of things. So This isn't the kind of thing that like I would all the time pick up on my own, but man, I am glad I did.
Yeah.
Because shoot.
Yeah.
It's something else. We are talking about The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. It's a book that was published in 1905. So this is the oldest book we've discussed so far. We're talking about I'm trying to think of what's second most, but it's not. It's more than 100 years old, 118 years old, year-old book made by Upton Sinclair, who is, some people call him the first muckraker journalist. He saw this book, even though it was fictional, he saw it as a work of journalism because he didn't include anything in this book that he didn't even either see with his own eyes or get from a reputable source that it happened to somebody. Now, it kind of all happens to the same couple folks in this book because, but the thing is, I don't find the book to be like completely unbelievable, even though they go through sort of some incredible trials. But
you've done factory work, right? You've been in it. You know what time it is.
Not on a meat processing floor. That's like some other stuff. But I worked on transmissions. Putting sealant on transmissions day in and day out.
I think anybody who has been in a factory setting and worked, in this kind of, anybody who's done that kind of work, big company work like that, I think will be able to see, and identify with this kind of stuff. Really, like
100%.
We've come a long way, sure, but God, man.
Yeah, but and we'll talk about it. But we've come a long way. But it was through victories. It had to be won. It wasn't. Right. The things that have gotten better have been, through struggle,
Right.
This book came out in, like I was saying, I have it written down, 1905, but shoot, 1 second. I wrote this information down somewhere. That's right. 1904, it actually was originally published, serialized in a newspaper called Appeal to Reason, because 5 publishers rejected it for being too shocking. Which I understand that, but it was so popular after it was serialized that somebody gave him a deal, published it in 1905, and it took off. And originally it had to be censored. They had to take some parts out, especially the last few chapters. A lot of it got censored and changed in the original releases. I think a lot of folks who still read the censored version. You can see why, because because people like reading about problems, but when he gets into the solutions, people get a little nervous, I think. Now it gets me excited when I read about the solutions.
Right. God, that was so needed there at the end.
God, I was really like, honestly, and we'll talk about, but when he starts meeting some folks that like, with some good politics, I was so worried they were going to like, they were going to screw him over too.
It seemed, I was,
and it didn't. I was like, I was ready for the. Oh man, but but it was good, and it's good. I'm glad he walked away with something.
Yeah.
But Upton Sinclair. We'll talk on him first, and then we'll speak to the book. Mason, just pipe in anything you want to say. But He was born in 1878 in Maryland, Upton Sinclair. His father was an alcoholic liquor salesman. His mother was a strict Episcopalian who was so strict about her religion she wouldn't even drink coffee. So that's a weird dynamic, and they
Wow.
lived in the same home. Uh, and they were pretty poor. You know, they weren't dirt poor, but he struggled. But his mother's parents were pretty wealthy. They came from money, and
Huh.
so he would go and visit them on summers, and he would see all the way the rich lived, and then he would come home, and they would always be, a
That makes
paycheck from the
sense.
poorhouse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
So he had that dynamic, and there was, of course, a lot of interfamily strife. I mean, he knew all about the, knocking heads and all that. But he
Right.
was just, an obsessive reader. Really loved language. He spoke 4 languages by the time he was 18.
Wow.
And he would write adventure stories, joke books, pulp novels. He helped pay for like his early college and stuff, writing some of that. They said he averaged about 8,000 words a day when he was writing, which is good numbers right there.
Woo!
I mean, like,
Yeah,
come on, if I do 1,000,
if when I was first the only little bit I had gotten about him was I read something that he at 15, was just banging out stories and making scratch off of it, like
yep,
making enough to, to
yeah,
handle his business. Like that's
absolutely.
insane.
And he was writing stuff like adventure stories set in the Civil War, or things like that. Like he was
That's
just
so
writing
crazy.
whatever, joke, like I said, joke books, just whatever came along, and he was making it work, selling it. He was a hustler. He wasn't.
Yeah.
He was doing okay, slogging as a pulp writer. He went to study law in college, just didn't like it very much, and so ended up studying English. I don't even know that he graduated,
Huh.
but he did okay for himself, slogging as a pulp writer until he tried his hand at journalism, and he was doing a little journalism here, a little journalism there, and then he decided, everybody's talking about this beef trust, this meat trust. I'm going to go check this out. So he goes to Chicago. He spends 7 weeks in Chicago working in the stockyards, writing stuff down, talking with folks, and he decides it would be better than writing an expose would be to write a novel and hit people where it hurts. So he wrote The Jungle, and that really made his career. I mean, that sold like insane numbers. We're still talking about it 115 or so years later.
Yeah.
And he did real well for himself. He ironically got pretty wealthy off this book.
Wow.
And yeah, and it's actually made him it made him good enough money that he was able to start pursuing politics. You wouldn't be shocked to know he's a socialist from this novel. Fellow, yeah, he did
He
not
ended
turn
up going
around.
into politics. I didn't
Yeah.
know about that either.
Well,
Wow.
he wasn't very successful.
I see.
That's
I
why
see.
you haven't heard of him.
Okay.
Yeah, he ran for senator, I think 3 times, lost every time.
I
He
see.
tried to start a commune. This is weird, and there's not a
Huh.
lot of information on it, in 1910, and it burned down under mysterious circumstances. No one knows exactly
Wow.
what happened. So he had enemies, it looks like. And
Wow.
shoot, he was so famous by when Teddy Roosevelt was in office. Teddy Roosevelt put out a statement in the newspaper saying, quote, "I have an utter contempt for that man. He is hysterical, unbalanced, and untruthful," end quote. That's high praise if the president's coming after you, I think.
Yup. He's
Yeah.
doing something right.
Yep. He just continued to write, books about the oil trusts were big, all kinds of stuff. He ended up going to jail a couple times, doing his protesting, helping with strikes, because things were real going crazy in the 1910s, 1920s.
Right. That would have been a really insane time to be doing these types of
yeah,
things.
because like a lot of the laws weren't solid on
Right.
it yet.
Right.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So he was going to jail, and every time he ran for something, he would get more votes than the last time, but he would never win.
Dang.
But he would, and you kind of see it in this novel, even the idea of, well, the socialist doesn't have to win, the socialist has to get more, and that there's like this building. So he was part of the American
Right.
Socialist Party. But in 1934, he gets asked by the Democratic Party in California, where he's staying at the time, to run for governor. And they'll say, we'll adopt most of the socialist ticket if you run for governor under Democratic Party. Now, that was real contentious at the time,
Huh.
because the socialists were like, shoot, no, we're going to do what they did in Russia, right? We're just
Right.
we're going to overthrow the whole thing. And then a lot of the more intellectual folks, people like Upton Sinclair, were like, well, I don't know that that's the conditions we're under here in the United States. So
Right.
he decides he's going to run as a Democrat. And he runs on the End Poverty in California program. He called it the Epic Campaign. Um, and I mean, he lost, but it was a near thing.
Huh.
Uh, he got opposed by everyone in Hollywood. I mean, everyone,
Uh,
the original Warner Brothers, everybody.
wow.
And there's even a movie that came out recently called Mank, where Bill Nye plays him briefly, and it shows him
Wow.
getting mistreated. Uh, and they just lied about him. They did whatever. And he
Yeah.
lost, and that was kind of the end of his political career. But at that point, he had kind of lost credibility with the socialists. A lot of them didn't think he was like really with it, like a real
Right.
revolutionary. We
Yeah.
were like, oh, you were electoral, you went with that.
Yeah.
So that led to some splits, and that's you can't entirely blame him for that. But at the same time, you also see where those folks are coming from.
Right.
Um, and this was the time where the socialists were getting cracked down on so hard that like
Right.
any
Right.
split.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so interesting. Those aspects of it, and then also like as you're reading the book and you're seeing like how timely it is, 100 years later. But
Yeah.
even those aspects, like the things you were just discussing, and how it ended up going with him, like
Well,
it's so
yeah.
weird how things cycle around.
Yeah, man. And it was a situation where he was talking about in his letters, and we're going to quote him enough probably that I won't get into too many quotes, but he was talking about how the markets and shit had reached such a place that there was like an apocalyptic confrontation coming within capitalism. And of course, in us, we're reading about the 1930s, we know Great Depression, then World War
Uh-huh.
II, which is
Uh-huh.
closest thing to, Judgment Day is anything that's ever happened in
Yep.
all of history, even still. And he's talking about that. And so he ends up, a lot of his policies end up from the Epic campaign getting adopted by FDR.
FDR, of
Yeah, and
course.
he waters them down a good deal because
Right.
and also one thing that he does is we always got to point it out when we talk about the New Deal is he cuts a lot of he cuts a lot of non-white folks out of the deal.
Yeah.
He does all that. FDR is no socialist, but
Right.
he
Right.
does implement these reforms like Social Security and things like that, or starts to these job programs that Upton Sinclair pushed for. And so Upton Sinclair even gets cited by multiple people in FDR's cabinet for probably some of the reasons they do some of these job programs, some of these environmental programs, things
Huh.
like that. And it's interesting because he really sees that. A lot of people really see that as a way they kind of bought off the working class to some extent. But at the same
Right.
time, it's like, shoot, like, what are you going to do? You got your backs up against the wall. I get why you take that deal, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, and I don't have much more to say on him here, but unfortunately, as he got a little older and he made more money, he got more and more comfortable kind of sitting as like a progressive Democrat. And
Mm.
he never really got back to his radical politics after the 1940s. He
Hmm.
even he even says like some stupid quotes about the Cold War and America and stuff. Like he got when he got old, he kind of like he
Had money for too long.
yeah, man. He lost he forgot what it was like to be a poor kid, I
Right.
think.
Yeah.
But he always supported good shit, like he
Yeah.
always was like, we need healthcare, we need housing, but he stopped having that we need to throw out the people and started just saying we need to whatever. But he died at age 90, real comfortable. Even Lyndon B. Johnson said some of the great society reforms, some of the last decent reforms in the United States were done on account of him. So, we own some of the good stuff for some of the reasons this shit's not like this anymore, at least some
Yeah.
of it. But at the same time, we also, to me at least, I see a little bit of a warning in it. Even like the most radical fella can get bought.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And and about how so at that time things were so wild and so they seemed like, of course, everybody believed, probably back then that things would have changed a lot more, but we've seen how they had all that energy, and a socialist writer was really popular, all that energy, and then however many years later we're still having the same fight. There was a
Mhm.
diverting and a breaking up, and there's a lot to it, of course, and you can't just point to any one thing, but the energy got redirected,
Mm.
and the lesson there, about staying focused and maybe not I mean, I don't know. There's probably a lot of lessons to be
Oh,
learned, but
sure.
yeah,
And there's a
don't
level
lose
of like
sight.
there's a level of a cycle to it though, like
Right,
because you do see some of the things that he most sharply criticizes here, like child labor and the diseased meat and this, that, and the other. Some of that was at least pursued to some extent.
right,
Never went away altogether.
right.
But for example, the Food and Drug Administration, a big reason that we get that is because of this book. In fact, the Clean Beef Act, I believe it's called, is only passed because of this book. In fact, they cite it on the
I
Congress
thought
floor.
so. Yeah, they actually
Mm.
cited it, and isn't it the child labor laws too? I was thinking.
That was a little bit more complicated, but the Pure Food and Drug Act
Okay,
is almost directly a result of this book, and the child
okay,
labor of this book was cited by activists and stuff.
I got you.
Um, and child labor has always been has always been a little more complicated than Food and Drug
I mean,
Administration
hell, they're
because of,
still trying to put them to work.
dude, that's what I was gonna say about the cycle. Because it's
Yeah,
like eventually the things you win, if you don't change it's gonna start slipping back. But yeah, and actually Upton Sinclair said, in I think 1907, I meant to hit America in their hearts and I hit them in their stomachs in the reaction to this book.
it's
Because
so
people
crazy.
were so disgusted by and I mean for good reason. This shit's
Right.
disgusting. Like thinking of eating that. But he said he was really hoping Americans would look at the labor side of it. And some people did, but the average reaction to it was disgust that the meat could be like that. Um, and while I appreciate the Food and Drug Administration, I do, especially someone with a nut allergy that they have to disclose if they got
For
nuts in something.
sure. Yeah.
That isn't what he was going for primarily with this book. But you see how that works, and then you see how how as history goes on, some of those things get scrapped, and as the US rises, it's able to throw aside some of these like social reforms and things like that it gets, and now we're at such a place where we're having the same conversations again
Yeah.
about things that
Capital adapts.
ought to have been settled. And
Yep.
of course overseas and shit, the people they exploit and the migrant labor and shit. I mean, like it's not like it ever really changed the real
Right.
face of
We
it.
just outsourced it. We
Mhm.
sent it to another place.
I mean, shoot, the Department of Labor admits that 500,000 migrant children work in the United States alone. So like,
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, like, and that's what they're willing to admit.
Yeah.
So like, you anyway, that's bleak as hell, but yeah, the point stands. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, what other, do you have any other thoughts on Upton Sinclair, like just as a guy before we want to get into the book itself?
Well, just that it is also, you see, like and this is, of course, you're going to have this at the time, but you see the blind spots also racially,
Yeah.
and blind spots in, and again, this one I would attribute more to the time, not the racial thing,
Hmm.
because I mean there were plenty of people who weren't racist assholes back then,
Yeah.
but this like all this being in awe of technology to the
Mm.
point of like thinking it is a savior,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
like you see it in the end, like in the beginning it's like this wondrous thing that sort of helps folks see past the butchery,
Yeah.
or whatever, but later on
Literal
it's
and figurative. Yeah.
right, but later on it's still held on to as like this hope for, as why things could get better, and that's, I mean, I still that's still a thing that socialists and communists and lots of folks on the left, we all argue about all the
Hmm.
time still,
Yeah.
like, so
I
it's
like that he threw in the guy who was like, "Wait, y'all are both socialists. You're arguing." I thought that's kind of funny.
yeah,
Who'd
that's
have
a
thunk
good,
it?
I'm glad yeah, like that's a really important point because it's in constant flux and that needs to be understood,
Yeah.
so but yeah, like it's seeing what a lot of those pitfalls were at that time when there was a lot of left energy and it seemed like things could really change, and things were just wild enough still in this country and open enough to where they could change.
Yeah.
Now we've got a lot more systems in place to control folks, and we need to be even more careful about the pitfalls.
Yeah.
So I think it's cool to read
Absolutely.
about, how he, him as a person, and that's why I'm glad you went over the other parts of his life. I didn't want to really get into it until we talked about it, because
Yeah, no, I got
that's
you.
really interesting to me.
Mhm.
And that's almost is a lot like what I expected, to be honest with
Yeah.
you. Now that you've told me, I do want
I
to read Oil though.
Oh yeah,
I do want to
100%.
read Oil
And
now.
it's supposed to all be good, like it's not everything he wrote is supposed to be real good.
Well, There Will Be
So
Blood is one of my favorite
oh
movies of
yeah,
all
There Will
time.
Be
I
Blood's
love it so
fantastic.
much. So I figured
Fantastic.
I need to get into that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was gonna just shoot, what was I gonna say? Nah, it doesn't matter. Yeah. There Will Be Blood's good. So yeah, I would love to read Oil. I know he was on the oil trust for a while there. He had a lot to say about it. Um, so yeah, he's he covered a wide range of topics. He's you know, very intelligent man, studied all sorts of things, knows his business, actually did the research before he wrote about folks. Um, so
For sure.
a lot of appreciation for what goes into this. But yeah, you know, we'll hop on into it.
All right.
So, as always, spoiler alert, I guess. I don't know. It's the book came out a century ago, so
Yeah, come on.
you had time. But no, I could say that, but I actually hadn't read it until for this pod. I was supposed to read it, or in high school, it was offered as a potential, like it was on a list of like 15 books we could read for like summer credit or something like that.
Yep. Yep.
So, and I think I knew a couple people who did it. I doubt, I don't really remember us talking too much about it.
That
But
was my experience with it, was reading it in high school as part of like one of those summer reading type things. But I might as well have not read it at all.
Shoot, and I feel like they probably give you the censored version too.
They had to have, because the only thing I remembered was how gruesome, the stuff in the slaughterhouses was.
Yep.
That's all I remembered.
Yeah. Oh, and it is gruesome.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah. But so yeah, it starts off as all great stories do at a wedding. We have it's I can't do like a Lithuanian accent, but it's like Jorgis, right? That's how you say
that's
his name?
how I'm.
Jorgis.
I've been so I did go into some of like the audio. They've actually got some cool audio versions on YouTube for free, and just to hear and I still could not pronounce the last names. There's no way.
Yeah.
There's just no way. But
Jorgis is, I think,
Jorgis.
how you say it, right? Jorgis.
Jorgis. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of the other names, not as much. Some of the Lithuanian names, but yeah, he's Jorgis is our main character. And he's a young man. I don't know exactly how old he is. He's in his early teens or 20 or so. He's not old, and he's getting married to his sweetheart Ona. They're having a Lithuanian wedding feast. These folks, they moved from Lithuania. Basically, it was a situation where times were tough. Times are tough everywhere. And Lithuania wasn't, as a industrial developed country as the United States in the early 1900s. And it's going through this situation where there's this massive competition on the global stage, but they're still basically living in feudalism. So they feel pressed, and they're hearing about this place where there's all these riches. And, they hear about all the riches. They don't hear about all the downsides. They hear high wages. They don't hear high prices. They just figure it's going to be like here, but more money. So they and some of their family, they move from Lithuania, and at the time, Lithuania would have been a pretty miserable place. It was part of the Russian Empire. I mean, so there was the fights going on with the Japanese. It was Tsar Nicholas II was just a real bastard. As all the czars were, but him especially. And of course, he would end up getting overthrown just a few years later. But at the time, if one asks if Jorgis had stayed in Lithuania, would have been any better, or would he have died in World War I? Who knows? Shoot, so they immigrate to Chicago because they hear the stockyards, the meat packing industry. You can make all kinds of money there. And it's basically like as they approach it, they describe it almost like it reads almost like Lovecraft as they
I was gonna
approach it.
say like Lovecraft writing cyberpunk.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
It's oh, God,
It's
it's harrowing.
scary.
Yeah, it's harrowing.
And it talks about the smell of the place, and it talks about, and I don't know if you ever been near a slaughterhouse, like a big one?
Yes. Oh
Yeah.
yes. Yes.
I knew exactly what it was saying.
Yep.
Um, I've not spent I've certainly not spent as much time as this family did near one, but
Ooh, I couldn't imagine living,
oh
you know
my
what I mean?
God.
Like, and the way, it's just because it's on a scale, everything is just on a scale that they have never even thought of before.
And they don't speak the language.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't know
It's
the
just,
customs.
it's crazy to
Yeah, they
imagine being in that position.
yeah, absolutely. And they're just kind of shuffled along. They're just telling folks we're trying to get to Chicago. They end up finding this one Lithuanian guy they happen to know. Um, but yeah, they're walking around, they're finding it. And Yorgis, he's there with it's him and his at the beginning fiance, soon to be wife Ona, and some of their family. Some of them are kids. He's got his father with him, his mother-in-law. And yeah, and they're doing okay at first because Yorgis is just he's a beast of a man. He's a real big guy. Like I'm imagining like a Dolph Lundgren, like Rocky
Me too.
Four coming
That's
from
what he was.
Lithuania.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's just huge,
Yeah, just a chunk of.
Yeah, and he's like, people are talking about, oh, life's hard, and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Life's easy. And it is for him at first, and man, I can't help but think of myself when I was 18 working at a factory because I was around that same age, big dude, and I wasn't working there to like I had a place to stay and stuff, so I wasn't, nobody was gonna starve on account of me.
Right.
But I would go. I was in there and I was kind of thinking like, man, I'm the cream of the crop here or whatever around all these old guys. And it's like,
Yep.
shoot, man, after I was there a month, I was a little hunched over. Like if I had been there however long some of these fellas have been there, I wouldn't have been looking half so good as they were.
Yep.
But I was imagining like, shoot, that's not too far off.
Well, that's exactly what I come from as well. Like, and I know so many Jurgises. I know so many Jurgises. I mean, I was born in South Alabama. Wasn't nothing but Jurgises around me. You know what I mean? And like that, the competition they all have with each other. Get around the men that still live down. I guess I'm still technically related to them. I don't really spend much time around it, but them fools that are still down there in any one of their conversations. And it is just a constant one-upping of, how much work I did and how much work I can do.
Yep.
And, it's so crazy, when reading that and reading how Jurgis's mindset was and how he, was just like, oh, you can't work like me, we'll piss on you,
Yeah.
It's so
Absolutely.
crazy.
Man, I remember that. I have so many dumb stories from that factory. That was I don't miss it, but man, it's just I know exactly just the type you're talking about. And I was to an extent, but I was just the same way. And I'm just, the situations just, circumstances are different. Man, we used to just all this stuff. But they also, the older guys there, the guys who had managed to be there for a long time, they knew they were still there because they hadn't thrown their back out. So they would play it up. They'd be like, young buck, I'm not strong enough to lift that over there. Man, me at 18, I'm bounding over there. Hindsight, I know they're probably still laughing at me. It cracks me up. Oh man. But yeah. But yeah, so it's him, and I'll run down the characters real quick. It's okay. They're all kind of they're not all super defined. Jurgis is the most defined character because you're really inside his head for most of it. And he's a simple man. He wants to take care of his family. He wants to take care of himself. His big dreams are like owning a home. He doesn't have he doesn't have really big aspirations. He doesn't really have an idea of what making it is outside of having a home, having some comfort, and his kids getting to go to school and maybe get to be skilled laborers instead of whatever. And he's married to Ona, and I'm not going to say Ona's last name. I don't know, Lukozite, something like that. Apologies to if we have any Lithuanian listeners. I know we don't. But yeah, she's sweet. She's a little younger than him. She's kind of frail, very pretty, but she's frail physically. I wouldn't say she's frail emotionally. she's quiet.
Oh, yeah.
She's soft spoken. But she's and she's real enamored by Jurgis' strength and stuff, and she's a real believer in the project as well. And she gets done pretty dirty. They all get done pretty
Oh
dirty.
God.
And then who else we got? What's Elsbieta, right? Is the mother?
Elsbieta, yeah, which is a cool
Elsbieta.
name. I think that's a
That's a good
cool
name.
ass name. Yeah.
And yeah.
Uh,
And no, it was funny. The Cliff's note just describes her as one line: Ona's stepmother, and then she endures one tragedy after another, never lives, only survives. It's like
yep.
Jesus.
Yep.
But that's Elsbieta. She's the grandmother who steps up, basically. Like I don't know what else to say. Like,
yeah.
if you've ever had like an older woman who just goes through hell for everybody, never complains.
Yeah. Just
Yeah,
holds it down.
absolutely. That's Elsbieta. And then you have is it Maria?
That's how I was thinking in my head. Since Jorgis, I'm pretty sure is pronounced like that. Then that makes sense.
Maria, yeah. Ona's cousin. And she's a big, strong woman. She's like the female Jorgis, basically. And she's big and strong, and she has like a bit of a romance with a fiddle playing guy. And she's and she's similar to Jorgis, is like she's gonna make it happen, and at first she really does have a lot of success. You have Jonas, not much to say about him. It's Elsbieta's brother, and he comes with his family, and when things get hard, he takes off. And I kind of expected him to roll back around. He just never really does.
I did, yeah, I did too.
Find him on the street or something, or he's gonna like come to the rescue. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. What do you think happened to Jonas?
So I think that was this may be just, in my head, but it was such a thing at that time to just, take it on the road, change your name. Yeah. Change your name and be a totally different person in a totally different place. And I think that was like, just like an interesting thing about the time that, to make he wanted to make sure that he included that, like, hey, sometimes this is just how the way it goes with some folks. You just change your name, go to a whole new life, and forget about, because it does come up a couple of times.
Yeah. I mean, and Jurgis does it for like a minute there.
Yeah.
A little bit different circumstances, but still.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you get it, while you're reading it, you're like, shoot, like, I understand you want to take off, at least see some green or something, go jump on a train.
Yeah.
But at least die not without the smell of rotten meat in your nose, like, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. And he, like you were saying, there's no internet, there's no like, social security. It's going to track you down. Like you can disappear relatively easily. You've got your papers, but I mean, they're just papers. That's it.
Right. Yeah.
And he probably didn't have papers in the first place, being a Lithuanian immigrant.
Yeah.
So who knows? But I was thinking, Joss and I always talk about like, well, what if this had come out when there was like, a big internet presence or been written? I was thinking, shoot, there have been all kinds of like theories on if it came out now, if on like, oh, Jonas is actually Jack Dewan and things like, people would be doing that shit. People would be doing that.
Would. That would have been the perfect theory too, right?
Yeah.
Is that Jonas came back as Jack Dwayne?
Yeah, or whatever, the socialist speaker or something like that.
Yeah, that would have been it.
He's Jonas, or but no, Jonas is gone, and best of luck to him, I guess. Who knows?
Yeah.
And then you got Anatis, that's Jurgis's father, and I mean, he made me so sad,
dude. That was oh man,
that's the first real kick in the teeth, I think.
Yeah, it got me bad. It got me real bad because I kind of had a similar situation in my family. It's one of those things like, and when it's mentioned, and brought up throughout he keeps mentioning, back with his father in the forest. I just fucking lose it every time, man.
Shoot, because his dad gets there and he wants to work. He's like, I can work like any man, and it's like, but they only are choosing the best guys, and they're throwing you out the second that you slack a second, and it doesn't matter how good you are or how good you think you are or how hard you want to work. And his dad ends up having to work down in some cellar and give half his wage to some asshole. who got him a job. And it's notable, you see from the beginning, that the people who are really making money in this town aren't the hard workers. The people who are making money are the people who know how to, like, fuck over the hard workers.
The hustlers, the grafters.
Yeah. Yeah. The like the, whatever, we call them grind set now, whatever you want to call them. But like the people who, like, they say work smarter, not harder, but what they mean is just exploit other people.
That's exactly what they mean.
Yeah. They're and we'll get to it, but Yorgos later on has his most successful financial moment is when he's acts like just like that. But yeah, and Otis, very early in the novel, he dies of blood poisoning, just doing this shit job. Until the day he dies, he's like, I'm getting up tomorrow. I'm gonna go back to my job. And they don't, and Yorgos doesn't even tell him that he's lost his job because he knows, everybody knows.
It breaks his heart.
Man, and they name his kid Otis after.
God, yeah.
It's like shoot. And I knew that kid was doomed from the moment.
I know. As soon as it happened, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, and then let's see. Then there's a bunch of like little kids. The only one I really remembered was Stanislaus.
Yeah, Stanislaus. Yeah.
Stanislaus, because he had a job. The other ones kind of like bleed together a little bit.
Yeah.
Some of them die of like just, I don't know, black mold or whatever. Some bullshit in the house.
Yeah.
And then Stanislaus gets eaten by fucking rats.
Like come on, man.
Yeah. Man, if this was, and you honestly can see that this was originally written and released as like a periodical, like coming out once a week.
Yeah.
And people were reading the next chapter.
Yeah.
Because you feel it almost has like, it's not, I'm not like trying to insult it by saying it has almost a soap opera bit to it, but it has a bit of like, and then to these people. But then you look at the numbers of how many kids would die before the age of 10 back then. And it's actually not, it's about right.
That's it. I mean, yeah, this is it would be an extreme case, just all of the stuff that happens to these folks. But I mean, this stuff is real shit.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's real stuff.
When you're in these conditions, and I guarantee you there is a family who got it just as bad.
Oh yeah.
Out there.
And Upton Sinclair said he only was pulling from stuff that actually happened. So like, which makes me feel sick to even,
I know.
But and stuff he heard about, stuff he saw, and he did this work for 7 weeks, not for one day, 7 weeks, that gives you the time to like,
yeah.
And I mean, of course he gets to leave, he gets to whatever, but even then, he's in it. He meets these people, he talks to these people.
Yeah.
He's eating the poison meat,
Yep.
Though kind of part of his point is we're all eating the poison meat. That's kind of part of the whole.
Yep.
And then there's a bunch of, little characters here, there. There's I like Tamosius, who's like the violinist.
Yeah, that was a good character too.
He's like a sort of just a, he's kind of a cut up. He likes to play his violin. He's a little quiet, except when the music's around, then he's the loudest fella around. And him and Maria kind of have a relationship. Yeah, not a lot to say about him. I'm just trying to think of characters that, like, if there's what needs to be said about.
Yeah, I think that was pretty much like there at the beginning. Of course, going once things develop a little bit more, like you're saying, Jack Dwayne when he gets locked up, when Yorgos gets locked up, things like that.
And honestly, like a lot of the novel doesn't have to be like super specifically summarized. It really is just him working and staying one step ahead of death. It is, they when they get there, they buy a house. And the guy who sells them the house completely swindles them. It's a situation where if they miss a payment, they lose everything, and they don't realize about how the interest works. And they don't realize how the taxes work. And he specifically writes it to make it, and the house is a piece of shit that looked good when they sold it to him. And basically the idea is nobody actually gets to keep these houses. So they're really slaving away for this house that's killing them with consumption, and it doesn't have like proper sewer underneath it. And
I thought that was an interesting scene when they realize that the paperwork says rent and not own, and then they run to a lawyer. She goes all the way out of her way to go find a lawyer to go over the document, and then the real estate agent ends up knowing that fucking lawyer too.
Yeah,
calls him by his first fucking name.
Yeah, they all know each other, and you see later in the book, Jurgis realizes all these people know each other.
Yup.
Like it's a club and you ain't in it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yup.
but yeah, they live in this house, and they're working different jobs. Jurgis is working on the factory floor, and he likes his work well enough. It sucks because he's just trimming meat. And he's not trimming meat. He's getting the meat trims and the entrails, and he's like raking on them around, and it's hot and it's steamy. And there's a quote I want to read because it describes what the inside of the factory is like when they're looking at it. And it's and basically, and it's kind of like, it's not subtle what it's trying to say. So I'll just read it. It's a little long, but I think it's worth reading. Quote, and real quick, he's looking over the factory, and he's taking it all in right before he starts his job. And it says, quote, "One could not stand and watch very long without becoming philosophical, without beginning to deal in symbols and similes, and to hear the hog's squeal of the universe. Was it permitted to believe that there was nowhere upon the earth or above the earth a heaven for hogs, where they were requited for all the suffering? Each one of these hogs was a separate creature. Some were white hogs, some were black, some were brown, some were spotted, some were old, some young, some were long and lean, some were monstrous, and each of them had an individuality of his own, a will of his own, a hope and a heart's desire. Each was full of a self-confidence, of self-importance, and a sense of dignity. In trusting and strong faith he had gone about his business, the while a black shadow hung over him, and a horrid fate wailed in its pathway. Now suddenly it swooped upon him and seized him by the leg. Relentless, remorseless it was. All his protests, his screams were nothing to it. It did its cruel will with him, if his wishes, his feelings had simply no existence at all. It cut his throat and watched him gasp out his life. And now was one to believe that there was nowhere a god of hogs, to whom this hog personality was precious, to whom these hog squeals and agonies had a meaning? Who would take this hog into his arms and comfort him, reward him for his work well done, and show him the meaning of his sacrifice? Perhaps some glimpse of all this was in the thoughts of our humble-minded Jurgis, as he turned to go on with the rest of the party and muttered, 'But I'm glad I'm not a hog,' end quote. And of course, Upton Sinclair says, 'I know writers who use subtlety, and they're all cowards.'
Yeah, man, that's such a good. I think "hog squeal of the universe" might be one of my favorite little phrases. Just
that'd be like a good album name, maybe.
Yeah, it would. It would.
Hog Squeal of the Universe.
Hog Squeal
like
of the
punk
universe.
rock or something. That'd be pretty dope.
Yeah, that was that. I knew that part. After reading that part, I was like, okay, I'm gonna. One of us is gonna have to read that.
Absolutely.
It's just, oh man,
it's important because, like, and that is the thing of it, because and it's, of course, have this actual horrible scene of all these animals dying. It's brutal and terrible, and but also, they are getting used like this, and Jorgis and all of them are worked at their various jobs, whether it's working in a cellar or painting cans or scraping meat or this, that, and the other, making sausages, and they're worked until they can't work anymore or until it's not convenient. Like Maria. As soon as they painted enough cans, doesn't matter how good a job you're doing. In fact, you did such a good job, we don't need you anymore.
Yep.
They lay you off. Or Jorgis, they only work him a couple hours a day, but make him stand out in the stockyard, freezing half to death, getting below zero up there in Chicago. He doesn't have any nice clothes, nice mittens, or any of that shit. He's, it's a situation where, he has moments where it's like, oh, we're trying things. We have moments where we feel like we're ahead. And it is like kind of quaint from the outside, because they're feeling like they're ahead as maybe having a little bit of savings. Maybe for once being able to, go grab a meal at the bar without feeling like you're failing your family. Like that's his ahead. It's not.
Yeah. Or to buy the simple things that you need in a home. Like, that was one of anybody that's, like, I know that hit for me when they were talking about after getting the home and having, well, now you got to put stuff in it. And
then they have to rent their furniture.
Yeah, rent furniture. And it's just like, God damn, I did all of this. I did all of this shit. And
yeah, man,
it's just so crazy.
and they're eating the, and it's wild because they're slaving away for food, and then, the irony's not lost that they're making food all day. You can't, you can't lose that irony. They're making the food and they're eating it, and shoot, it's a situation where it's like the food is garbage, like, and it even says like, uh now they thought they were fine eating sausage or whatever it was, and they would have been if it was from Lithuania, but this was American
Right.
food. They had
Yeah.
rejected it in Europe. They'd sent it over. And that's one thing where it's interesting because, to this day, the United States has some of the lowest standards for what passes in food and what gets away
Hmm.
with it. And I mean, you even have description in this book of the government inspector who, when the meat's coming by, he said he'll happily have a conversation with you for 20 minutes about how important his job is while the meat's just going by and by and by. And he's not taking a look at it.
Yeah, it's so crazy to think that that's another aspect too. It's like the way the saying they have, they use everything but the squeal.
That's right.
And it's the same case for the workers too. Like they use every part of these workers,
Mm-hmm.
and every moment of their time that they can have,
Mm-hmm.
and every bit of life force that these workers have. And they do, come back to it a couple of times about, like, so as Jurgis starts to see the parallels between, and all the fucked up ironies in all of it. But and then again, this is something that's still going on today.
Oh yeah.
It's and most people are just like, I know a lot of people who are well aware of it, and literally will tell you not to talk to them about it because it
Yep.
grosses them out,
Yep.
but they would rather that, I would rather just keep doing it, keep eating it or whatever, just
Mm-hmm.
not, or keep whatever part of this, the situation you're in. If you're one of the workers, it's like people get mad at you if you try to tell them, like, hey, these motherfuckers are using you like a damn steer, like a
Mm-hmm.
hog,
And it's hard because it's hard to think of it. If you
Yeah.
don't have a solution, then you're like, you'd rather not think.
Yeah.
But here's the thing I noticed when I was reading it is multiple times in the last couple chapters, it mentions either Jurgis or one of the socialists giving like a great cry. And it's almost like that squeal of the hog they couldn't use is being like claimed by the workers. It's given that
Yeah,
you're
that's a
given
good
that
point.
cry. Yeah. And it's that, the guy on the stage who's speaking, he even talks about like, and I'll quote him later, but he talks about like the cry of the working man. And it's kind of like, yeah, that's the squeal that they
Yeah.
couldn't sell.
Yeah.
And they got it. But and that's what's important. But yeah, no, I know exactly what you're saying. And I mean, shoot, like, I mean, when I worked at Chili's, like some of the fry cooks wouldn't eat the food they cook because they knew they knew
Uh-huh.
they knew what those news, and that's and I'm not, it just depends on the Chili's. I'm just saying this
Yeah, right, of
specific.
course.
I'm
Yeah.
not telling you not to eat at Chili's. It should probably be sanitary. This was a special situation here. Um, but it was like just that genuine, like, people are generally, workers at least are generally aware of the bullshit. Like they're not like, even when Jurgis gets there, it doesn't take him long to realize that his like original opinions are wrong.
Right.
It's just kind of like, oh man, what do you want me to do?
Yeah.
Um, eh,
And once you, at first it was the, okay, that all may be true, it may be shit, but I'm a goddamn king. Look at my
yeah,
fucking, I'm buff as fuck, dude.
yeah,
Look at me. I'm not worried about this shit. I
but
got
then,
it.
yeah. And then
We'll
he
see, buddy.
stops eating that Lithuanian diet. He stops
Yep.
eating that forest diet,
Yep.
stops hiking, working on railroads and all that, what he was doing up there, and
Uh-huh.
starts, taking care of his family and breathing in whatever the hell
Yeah.
chemicals, and it starts bringing him down. And and they go through ups and downs, after his father dies, things are hard, but Timosius, the musician, he kind of brings some levity to it. and
Yeah.
and Jurgis, he gets some hope working with the union. He's like, oh, the union will take care of me. They don't really do too much for him at
No.
this point. But um he doesn't realize, how it all works. But this idea of, oh, we're all going to stand together, that's important to him. But unfortunately, nobody really can stand for him when when he has this really, obviously his father dying is this big blow emotionally, but his first big blow where it's like, oh shoot, we're going to end up on the street, is when Cal breaks out and it breaks his arm, or
Yeah.
dislocates his arm. Or is it his leg or is it his arm?
I thought it was his shoulder. I think, yeah, because he says he pulls on it and pulls it back. No, wait, no, it was his ankle.
No, it's later.
Ankle.
Yeah, it's an ankle because later he hurts his arm.
You're right. It was the ankle.
He goes, yeah, it's his ankle here. It's his arm later.
Yeah.
Yeah, he breaks his ankle and he just goes through this absolute hell of just having to sit around. And watch his family, fall apart, and watch his wife. She does not need to be. And at this point, she's had a little son. And he loves the son, little Anatus, but it's like now she's sick because she never really recovers from giving birth to him. And the snows are high. This is Chicago, and people are getting sick, and the kids are terrified, and the one little kid is having to put lard in buckets, and Jurgis has to, lay there on the bed, and you're seeing Jurgis through this positive spirit. It's interesting because at the beginning he's optimistic, and then when he loses the optimism, he becomes positive, and we're going to work to change it. And you're starting to see him like lose that like edge, and you're starting to see him for the first time like be a dick. But he's like kind of, I mean, you have trouble, you have trouble blaming him for it at this point. You know what I mean? Like the shit he's gone through.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, like, there's no way for him to educate himself about any of this stuff, really.
Yeah.
It's all just shit happening to him. So, like, and he is just like a regular, simple ass dude. So it's not like the solutions that he comes up with whenever he gets in these situations can be have much nuance to them, or, it's just, honestly, it's just fight. That's all he knows.
Yep.
Really. And then you see after a while of fighting, it hardens your edges.
Yeah, it wears him down. And I mean, like, he's struggling, and it gets worse and worse, struggling not to drink too much. And he's struggling, with how he treats his family. And he even has the incident. He has an incident with, the kid with the long name,
Stanislaus.
Stanislaus, where
broke my heart,
man, where the kid's, terrified to go because he's gotten frostbite, and Jurgis just is like, knows that the kid doesn't really realize the stakes, that they're going to starve to death or be turned out of their home. And Jurgis is telling him he has to go, and Jurgis beats him and makes him go. And you see like how this like system is really intruding and is ripping up this family that really just are genuinely like just decent folks.
They do a good job. That was probably, I think, one of the most important aspects that needs to be screamed from the mountaintops today, that people need to realize, I think, and a good reason to read this book is show how capitalism poisons the family.
Yeah.
It's just, there's no way to have a family in that system. I mean, it's going to try to eat it. It is going to try to eat it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't shy away and be like, and Jurgis through the whole time was always good and he never did anything bad. Like, it doesn't do that. That would have also been, a failure of the book. Right. But that doesn't do that. No, he behaves horribly, does some pretty terrible things in this book. A lot of them do. But you also see exactly why. You see the cause and effect. It makes me think of, like, in the Communist Manifesto, Marx even says, and I don't know the quote exactly, but he says one of the things they decry is the communists seek to destroy the family. He says, I say you have already destroyed the family by making it an economic unit. And I thought that was interesting. Like,
that is a great point. Yeah.
Yeah. And it remains true. Yeah. But yeah, Jurgis eventually recovers, but and he can't really go back to work where he used to. So he ends up working in the fertilizer mill. And that part is, oh my God.
God damn.
And I mean, and it's just, I've got a quote on this too, because it's just, I can't say it without, he says it best. And this isn't as long as the last one, but this is quote, he was working in the steaming pits of hell, day after day, week after week, until now. There was not an organ of his body that did not work without pain, until the sound of ocean breakers echoed in his head day and night, and the buildings swayed and danced before him as he went down the street. And from all the unending horror of this, there was a respite, a deliverance. He could drink. He could forget the pain. He could slip off the burden. He would see clearly again. He would be master of his brain, of his thoughts, of his will. His dead self would stir in him, and he would find himself laughing and cracking jokes with his companions, and he would be a man again and master of his life. End quote.
God, man.
Because he's working with literal shit now, like literal shit.
Yeah, the worst.
All day.
Yeah, and oh man, the way they talk about having to leave the place open because they're just breathing it in all the
Mm-hmm.
time, just constantly.
No, he when his
It's
first day, he almost passes out in the first half hour, and they tell him you'll get used to it. And I mean, he kind of does, but like his every organ is infected with it. And it even says till the day he dies, he was a fertilizer man, which is interesting because he's not in the literal sense. He only does it for like, I don't know, a year or two, but it's literally it is in him. Like he is not getting it out of him. It said to get the smell out of him, he would have to literally sweat because it's so in his pores.
Yeah.
Like you'd have to sweat multiple times to like get all the gunk out of him. And I mean, and he was like, even when he was unemployed, he was like terrified that he was going to get hired because the place is just that bad. I mean, and he does it, you know, to like his credit, he does it, and it's driving him to alcoholism, and it's driving him to misery. And of course, he comes home and he's, you know, smelling like the thing out of a swamp. Or whatever, like or
and
not, worse than
everybody
that.
everybody is in bad spirits at this time by the time they get home, you know,
Oh
because
yeah.
everybody's coming home from shitty, horrible fucking jobs, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody is just so completely broken by the time
Yep.
they get there that there's just no, you know, there is no more what little bit of levity they can find, you know, it just there's no time for that shit, you know,
Yeah,
and nobody
and
wants to be around each other.
Maria and you know, the musician, they're like they keep having to put off their marriage. And you know, I think at one of these points, one of the little kids dies of something like just some disease or another. It's not super like expounded on. There's honestly so many of the little kids. That
Yeah.
part's a little hard to keep track of. And it's kind of like and you know, Elzbieta just kind of bears it. And
Yep.
it's a situation where you know, it's all, you know, at its absolute. Oh, the kid dies of food poisoning. That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
The
that's what it
youngest
is.
child,
The youngest,
the handicapped kid.
yeah, yeah,
And only Elzbieta really even cares is the
yeah.
sad thing. Like they care, but they're like, we don't have time to be
But
like
he was
this.
a trouble. He was, you know, a lot to deal with. And that,
Mm,
God, that just thinking about how they were when they first started to then, you know, we haven't really been there that long. And then now they're
no, it's a
already like,
couple of
well,
years maybe.
a kid's dead, and we, you know, it's just one less burden off of us. That's how a lot of them think of it.
And they say the
Fuck.
work is becoming more demanding and the wages are falling, you know, because it talks about the speeding up. And then they realize if we speed up the work, we work them less hours and we pay them less for more work. It's just like, yeah. And they got this army of surplus labor right outside, folks who were just below. And it's like, hey, you slip up. There's a guy who'll take your place in a minute.
Yep.
And you know, these folks on the street would be happy to have your shit job. And then it's this idea of like, you know, well, what do you do? Even a strike is difficult to carry out, even if you all
Right.
do it, because there's an army of guys, and nobody can blame them for wanting work and being willing to work for a penny less or whatever.
And all the
And
gangster shit that these type of systems like create, all the, he calls them grafts, but
yeah,
like all the little gangster hustles and shit, systems that these things create, you know, whether it's the like, okay, when you've got all these people who will do anything for a job, and you know, people working their asses off, scared that they're going to lose it, there's all kind of hustles that come up in that desperation, and they
100%.
explore a lot of them.
No, yeah, and at every corner there's somebody who will, you know, will get you a job if you pay him a quarter of your money. There's a guy who will pay you half a dollar to vote 10 times for a candidate. There'll be a, you know, a union guy who gets paid by the bosses to let him know what's what. You know, there's, you know, and then you have the bosses, you know, the men who are running things. And it's interesting how it divides. They're divided, these like, and they're not white collar, but what we would think of sort of like a PMC, like a, you know, an educated guy. They're also, you know, they don't make any money relatively
really
either.
Yeah.
I mean, like it has some kind of quote where it says, yeah, here's a quick part where it says, a poor devil of a bookkeeper who had been working in Durham's for 20 years at a salary of $6 a week and might work there for 20 more and do no better, would yet consider himself a gentleman, you know, and they never talk to each other because he's Chicago born. He's not going to talk to these Poles, these
right,
and whatever. And he's gonna, and he makes maybe a little bit more money than Jurgis.
Yeah, he's got just enough to wear better clothes and eat at better restaurants, but that's it. That's
crazy. He looks down at Jurgis and says, "Well, I'm better than him," and Jurgis looks down at the guy on the street and says, "Well, I'm better than him."
Right.
And then they don't all grab hands and look up.
Right.
Which is what that's kind of the point. But it's what it keeps them from doing. It's kind of like I've heard the point that you have folks in offices who are exploited, but they can call an Uber, they can call DoorDash, and they've got their little app servant who comes and helps them. And then you've got the people working the app jobs, and they got the homeless folks, and they're like, well, what am I going to do?
At least I'm not going back to that. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, they're not grasping hands. Hey y'all, that is the end of part 1 of our jungle discussion. Please come back next week for part 2. And until then, I am begging you, stay away from diseased meat, okay? It's got really negative effects. If you can, also stay away from buying scam houses. Stay away from breaking your ankle and then working on it. Stay away from joining union busting armies. Stay away from leaving your country and moving to Chicago on the promise of wealth, only to find nothing but misery. And if you can, just generally stay away from the meatpacking district. Okay, appreciate y'all. See you next week.